Now, you're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's RBLR Sports.
Hello, everyone out there in Tampa Bay and beyond. This is James Knowles coming at you for the RBLR Sports podcast. I am here tonight to cover the Rowdies like I usually do. We did not have a game this past weekend, but Carlos, there is plenty of soccer to talk about, including a game that I think you just wrapped up watching.
I'm about to throw up, James. This is a thank you to you and to Eureka and to everyone at RBLR for accommodating my very important schedule of watching the Ecuador game against Colombia today. It's always a much more stressful game when we play against Colombia because I always want to beat Colombia, like even more so than like Argentina sometimes. This was one of them, James. Oh my goodness. 1-0, down a man since like the 30th minute. And away from home. We haven't won in Colombia in like over 50 years. Historic stuff. So I'm pretty amped. I'm calming down, I think, because my heart was pounding out of my chest for about 2 hours. But we're here. Like you said, no Rowdies game to talk about, sadly. If there was, that'd be pretty nice. But again, no Rowdies game. There's some stuff to talk about, James. It's the beginning of a long off season, but an off season that flies by pretty quickly. That's what I usually say. There's so much to talk about. I think it's a good time to kind of start reflecting, thinking about how this year went, talk about some players, give some expert reviews on how we think our players did this year. Maybe hints at who we would like to see back next year. So yeah, I mean, there's lots to talk about here. I think we can get some good content, and I'm hoping that anybody tuning in live can give us their thoughts on some of these folks we're about to talk about and give us some of their own professional reviews. But James, before we do any of that, how is your day going? How's it going down there in beautiful Tampa Bay?
Well, Carlos, while you were watching the Chasing Glory, watching the people who are trying to qualify for the World Cup, there are some of us who are doing real sicko hours and watching the teams trying to qualify for the Gold Cup. So I just want to put that out there. You stay hunting glory like that, and I'll keep watching. I think Suriname lose right now.
Wow. Well, you know what? Suriname is in South America.
It is. That's true.
That to me that counts as non-sicko behavior. That's almost CONMEBOL. So I'll count it. That's respectable to me. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got the Carlos stamp of approval, but we do need to get into our player grades to start our postseason review. So let's do that in my very good segue there from listing one thing to listing the next thing.
It works.
Please pay attention to us later in the show when we get into the team news announced for the Rowdies. There's actually a little bit of that already to go over. And we're going to talk about the upcoming USL Championship final that is this weekend. It does not involve the Tampa Bay Rowdies, but it does involve several former Tampa Bay Rowdies. So that's kind of interesting.
And a former
Today, though, we will be doing our postseason review, part 1 of 3, at least. I think it is 3. And today we will be covering the midfielders and the goalkeepers. Why the midfielders and the goalkeepers? Because there are a lot more midfielders on this roster than I actually thought there were. And I could not fit them in with the defenders or the attackers. This is going to be the way that it works out. That is the broad plan for how we're going about this. And if you would like to hear any part of that, please stick around to join us for it. Like and subscribe to the show, and you can watch us, of course, on YouTube. You can subscribe on any major podcast platform, and please follow us at RBLR Sports on whatever social media you use. We are on all of the big social medias. We are also on all of the new social medias, including Threads and Blue Sky. Apparently, we are close to 300 on that. I believe specifically for the Rowdies. I'm sure Eureka will correct me as soon as he gets a chance if I am wrong. So, yes, we are close to 300 specifically for the Rowdies on Blue Sky. If you would like to join us there, there is a thriving community in addition to all of the other places where you can get our information. So please do that if you would like it. Carlos, let's get into the first segment here that is specifically part of our postseason review, and that is the midfielders. We are going to we're going to go through the list of players in order of their roster number. So obviously it will be the number 1, 2, 3, 4, which is actually where we start tonight, and on. The first player on this list then is Lewis Hilton, Very easy place to start, actually.
Yeah.
Carlos, I'll give a quick run through for Lewis Hilton. He's 31 years old. He made 38 appearances this past season, 38 starts for Lewis Hilton, friend of the pod with 38 starts this season, a true Ironman, 2 goals and 2 assists. Only 5 man of the matches, which I honestly found surprising because while 5 is a lot for how many we ultimately have given out over the course of the season, I always expect that he would get more because he is so influential. But he, I guess, is one of those players who doesn't always show up on the stats sheet for how influential he is. And he is re-signed for the 2025 season. So, Carlos, let's get into this. I guess we can give him a grade at some point here, but I feel like everybody generally has a relatively pretty similar grade for Lewis Hilton.
Yeah. By the way, is that or is that not every game of the season that he started?
That is every regular season game and 2 Open Cup games.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was double checking. I wanted to make sure I got that stat right. Yeah, every single game getting a start for Lewis Hilton. That by itself should indicate how a player's season went. I mean, if you're consistent enough to get a start every single game, that's fantastic. To give you a grade. How are we doing this grade, by the way, James? I forgot we did this last season. Are we doing letters? Are we doing a number? You know what I mean?
I was thinking letters.
Okay.
That's just easy. But
okay. Let's do it.
if there's a better system, obviously, we can happen upon that.
Yeah. If we're running with that, James, I'm going to go and give you my easy answer for this. Lewis Hilton gets a solid A. Flat A. Not an A-, not an A+. Just a great A. A 95 out of 100, James. That's what you get on that test. And you're just like, yeah, I aced that. Lewis Hilton had another fantastic season. He had 2 goals too, by the way, like you said. Doesn't happen too much for him. But he nailed those 2 goals and one of them, a lovely one against Louisville that unfortunately didn't lead to more points.
Yeah.
Can't remember where his other goal came, but obviously he had that game-winning penalty against Detroit as well, right after he was on the pod. Do with that what you will. Lewis Hilton starting off strong with our player reviews here. I mean, this is a guy who, can I spoil the news? I guess we can save it for later. But in a world where I don't know if he signs for next year or not, this is a guy 100% you want back to keep that core together. This is a guy that's fundamental to the Rowdies culture and the Rowdies identity in the last several years. And he's continued to demonstrate why he's one of the most consistent midfielders in the year this year, even if the numbers aren't the flashiest or the most, exciting. It's not really his position naturally, but still putting up consistent performance after consistent performance, getting a couple goals in the process. Yeah, this is a guy that gets an A.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that. I said only 5 man of the match. You're going to notice when we get through this that 5 is very high. We do not ultimately get to a lot of people who have 5 or above, but I expected it to be more, like I said, because Lewis Hilton contributes so much to this team. He is emblematic of, I think, an ethos that any coach that has been involved while Lewis Hilton was here has tried to get throughout the rest of the team. I guess that would be 3 coaches: Neil Collins, Nicky Law, and now Robbie Nielsen. But all of them.
Dobson.
That's true, actually. Good point. Very good point.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting one, but yeah. So Lewis Hilton is an incredible player for this organization. I think that he is going to go down whenever he ultimately leaves, in whatever way, as a true club legend. And it's unfortunate that his position is one where he dictates. Usually it's the pass before the pass, so to speak. So unless we're counting MLS or hockey assists, he's not going to get on the stats as frequently. But yeah, he is definitely a player that the Rowdies are going to want to keep around for as long as he can, as long as his legs will carry him. And as far as we can tell, that's going to be a little while longer. I give him an A+ as well.
Oh, an A+. I gave him an A. You gave him a perfect.
You're right. Okay. We'll keep it consistent for now. I will say an A as well.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I guess I was trying to say an A2, but A2 is different from A+ because A+ means something.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Easy. Lewis Hilton gets an A. Again, if you're listening to this live, I'm sure you agree with this one, but for whatever reason, if you don't, I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts.
Tell us why.
Yeah. Exactly. But again, there's some interesting folks in the midfield here and we'll talk about. So I want to hear some thoughts as well. James, the next player you have in numerical order is a player that only played 4 games for us and then went down to Miami. This one's hard to grade, but it's a player, Joey Desart. Again, a guy who didn't get much time on the field in a stacked midfield already. It seemed difficult for him to actually do that. He had 4 appearances, 3 off the bench, and then he left for Miami. He has no like stats in terms of goals or assists or really anything. I guess we can go through and look at his passes completed and stuff if you want, but this is a guy who just didn't get much playing time, not really influential on the field when he did come in. I gave him a little bit of flack because it seems like when he did come in, he didn't really make anything of his opportunities. I don't know. It's hard to grade someone who only played 4 games, but if we're giving him a grade based on the few minutes he did have, it's a pretty unremarkable D plus, if I have to say. I mean, it wasn't even really average. He had a couple bad performances in there, and it was just kind of unremarkable. But again, just not a lot of playing time, hard to grade. I hope he does, finds a spot that works for him. I assume it's not Miami because no one's going to find success down there right now. So good luck to him, but it wasn't the right fit for us this year.
Yeah, I tend to agree. There are going to be a couple of players that I give a non-grade to, which doesn't mean a failed grade. And if you get a no grade in school, that means you failed. That is not what that means here. But
yeah, it's a withdrawal.
Exactly. Yeah. Joey Desart, unfortunately, I think that the level that the Rowdies wanted was just not what he was producing. And that's hard to say for anybody because they're all, as much as they're athletes, they're also people. But if we're grading them specifically on the athletic performance that they showed here, unfortunately, I would say that Joey Desart being let go to Miami pretty early in the season probably was the best option for him. I don't know, just like you said, if it's going to work out for him because there are rumors swirling around that organization at the moment. So we'll leave that for maybe another week or a month in the future, I guess. But yeah, Joey Desart, we do wish him all the best, just like we do any player who, I don't know, doesn't burn our bridges along the way. But yeah, I don't think that I would probably go ahead and give him a D as well. I don't know how much more we could offer in this case in our very, very scientific system we've got going.
Yeah. No, again, this is not a lot of these aren't going to be based on stats. So again, that's why I appreciate any insight any of the listeners listening live have. Again, it's just hard to grade someone who hasn't played much for this team. And it wasn't like terrible by any means, just unremarkable, and he didn't really make the most of his opportunities, which ultimately led to that leaving to Miami. By the way, we can talk so much about the USL like situation as a whole with so many of these clubs relocating.
There's much to cover.
Yeah, there's a lot we can talk about, and maybe this episode's not the right one when we get to extra time, but I think we can hit on that at least slightly because keep up with the news around the USL. I think there's some discussions to be had about the USL's expansion approach and, whatnot. So just an interesting. Hope Miami FC survives, but again, it's pretty bleak right now. To the next player, James, another player who was only here for a short period of time, but I think who made a bit more of an impact. Ryan Spalding came in on loan, quickly was recalled by New England Revolution, only to not play any more minutes for the senior team. I mean, based on the reports from their local beat reporter, seemed like he wasn't thrilled about being called back to New England, especially, looking like he's going to play for their 2 team. Doesn't really make sense to me still to this day why they recalled him. Seems like a great fit for him down here at the Rowdies. And he had some great moments, by the way, too. I mean, we gave him 1 man of the match. He had 4 appearances, 4 starts. No incredibly remarkable games, but I mean, hey, he was only here for 4 games. Again, hard to give like a solid overall Rowdies performance grade for him, but I would give him a passing C+. I mean, it was fine, nothing crazy. It wasn't the Spalding sanity we had last year, right? That was incredible stuff. I mean, he came in and just lit the league on fire after 1 game of kind of settling in. This wasn't necessarily that. He actually had kind of a not so great first game and kind of settled in and got a bit more comfortable. I'm sure the numbers would have come with a bit more time, but again, you can't do much with 4 appearances in his position. He had 1 decent game, though. I mean, 1 pretty good game. We gave him man of the match, clearly. So overall, fine, solid enough. He contributed when we really needed some bodies. We're dropping like flies in the injury department. So he came at a really great time, kind of helped us survive at least a month with how we were struggling with, The results brought a good jolt of energy, and then was rapidly taken away from us. So really hard to grade, but I think that's where I'll leave my grade for him. I mean, decent 4 games, but what can you really say?
Yeah, his circumstances are very important to point out. Just like you said, he didn't know that he was going to be called back as early as he did. It seems like he
Yeah.
didn't appreciate that. It seems like we don't know for certain, but it does look that way. So it's weird. And he was also brought in originally while Blake Bodley was unavailable, and then Blake Bodley became available again. So he moved from a left wing back to a full left winger spot. Yeah, it's hard to say anything more than a C. I totally agree with that. So I think that we can leave it there and move on to the next guy.
Yeah. I mean, again, that being said, he had fine games. Like, he was involved in that win against Miami when we really needed to bounce back. Again, it's kind of a win you should be getting 100 times out of 100. But hey, he brought the energy we needed at least a little bit, and helped us get somewhat back on our feet. That was a really interesting lineup when we had Bodley and Spalding on that left side. I wasn't totally sure how I felt about it, but it worked at least for a game. But yeah, what can we say about him? Hope he does well. I mean, he hasn't played another game since being recalled by the Rowdies. Not by the Rowdies, by New England. I think it's highly unfortunate. This guy has so much talent and he deserves minutes somewhere. I wish it was with the Rowdies, but we'll see what happens going forward. Keep an eye on him. Who knows? Maybe he comes back. It seems to be a trend. Come back for a little bit, head back to New England. We'll see. Damian Rivera, though, is the next guy on our list here, James. This is a guy who surprised me, I think, to put it lightly.
Also on loan from New England, it should be noted.
Correct. Also on loan from New England. So presumably he's heading back to New England this year. Who knows? I would hope that there's a world where he stays another year on loan, or maybe he stays with us, on a permanent deal. I don't really see where he fits in the New England picture right now, if that makes any sense. Like,
I don't know how many players currently fit in that picture with the way that things are going there.
That's fair. Again, we've seen that New England operates on a strange, kind of doing things on a whim, apparently, with Spalding. That was demonstrated. So, hey, if we're hinting at players we want back, this is a guy I'd love to see back on this squad. Yeah. He was truly, truly a spark off the bench in almost every game he had. Slower back end of the year, but I think that's kind of the situation for a lot of folks on this team. But I mean, how many times can you say he came on the field off the bench and scored a goal? You can look back at so many of these, and I'm just looking back at like his season, ratings on FOTMob. 8 minutes against Rhode Island and he scores a goal, right? 15 minutes against Louisville, he scores a goal. 16 minutes against Indy, he scores a goal. 19 minutes against Charleston, he scores a goal. And these are like in that early to mid part of the year, he was just on fire coming off the bench. Starting, he had success too, occasionally, but it seemed like he really found his rhythm coming off the bench. This is a guy who's an incredible utility player. He surprised me with his energy. He surprised me with how much he has to offer at such a young age. This is a guy who gets a really, really solid B+ from me. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to kind of, some of these player grades are unique because there's a guy that comes off the bench almost all season. He had kind of a slower back end of the year. Actually, I'll switch it to a B, just a solid B. Towards the back end of the year, again, he slowed down a little bit, but so did most of the team. This is a guy who I'd love to see continue on this team because I think he has so much more to offer, and we're kind of just unlocking it. We're just at the tip of the iceberg with him. I think New England would benefit by leaving him down here at least another year. But again, New England, I don't know what the hell you guys are doing up there, but leave him here for another season.
Yeah, I don't know. I will say with him being on loan, we don't know the future, obviously. He is originally from Rhode Island. You would assume that somebody in Rhode Island, like the club, is thinking about this. Yeah. But I will point out Damian Rivera did have a very good season, specifically down here in the Tampa Bay region. As you mentioned, 38 appearances and 30 of those were off the bench. Yeah. That's pretty nuts. 7 goals overall. I think 1 or 2 in the Open Cup. I don't remember. But the point is, his 5 man of the match, I can remember almost all of those were games where he came on late and made a difference as that super sub role that we came to know him in. you get 5 man of the match awards and you don't start, you only start 8 games. That's pretty that's pretty wild. So
Yeah.
maybe he can work his way in the future into a more regular player, and I'm sure he would love to. Everybody would who makes it to any level. That's how you get there, because you're super competitive. But yeah, he obviously is a player with a lot to offer, and the fact that he can do it in the way that he did. He would always come off the bench when the opposing defense was tired, and he would be like, all right, I'm going to run at you every single time I get the ball, and eventually I'm going to beat you. And one of those times I might even score. So yeah, I would definitely like to see him come back. And if we do get to benefit of his services again, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'll give him a B.
Yeah. Solid. Again, 30 appearances off the bench, coming off the bench like that consistently. Like, I think there's kind of like a negative connotation associated with that, coming off the bench, right? But when you get that many appearances off the bench, like, again, that's kind of a level of consistency in a different way from like a Lewis Hilton, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like almost a guarantee that if you're not starting, Robbie Nielsen is going to turn to you at some point in the game. 20 minutes left to go. Damon, your turn. Like, it's almost like he must have known when he was coming in. You know what I mean? Like, even if he was on the bench, I'm sure he knew he was going to come in at some point, and he was always ready. And again, plenty of great appearances. So yeah, great for him. Super young player and really soft-spoken, good kid. Hoping the best for him if he doesn't stick around. But hey, wouldn't mind if New England lets us have him for at least one more year. Speaking of one wingback guy, Blake Bodley, 26 years old, turning 27, 32 appearances, 28 starts. So out of those appearances, plenty of starts. He had 1 goal, 7 assists, and we gave him 7 man of the match awards, James. That's a lot. I think that's the most of the midfielders, if I'm not mistaken. This is kind of a difficult one for me because the numbers look good for a wingback. Someone from that area and the area of the field having 1 goal, 7 assists, getting that many starts is pretty solid. He had a bit of an injury run, in a bug in the middle of the season, as we mentioned with the Ryan Spalding bit, right? So that was unfortunate for him. But I think where his grade drops for me, James, is that he had a really quiet back half of the season. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the injury bug, the injury he had in the middle affected that. But it seemed like he kind of came out of the gates flying. He settled in very, very quickly with an assist in that game against San Antonio to open the year. A few games later, had another one against Miami, another one against Memphis, 2 against Birmingham, 1 against Tulsa, 1 against Vegas. And that was all in the first half of the season. After that, like, his next memorable performance for me was for a negative, and it was that really silly red card against Loudoun United, if you recall that one in Virginia. Yeah. And again, like, maybe that's on me for remembering that one as a sticking point, but it was just a really silly red card back then. And to this day, I don't know why it played out that way. After that, it was just pretty quiet. He had 1 more assist on the season. It was at the end of the year against Indy. So it came at a great time, right, to build that momentum. But it was a very, very quiet second half of the season. He has incredible, like, very good numbers from his position at his role as wingback. Very, very good numbers. But again, I think a really, really quiet second half of the season. He kind of fell off, maybe because of the injury again, when we really needed some energy at that spot. So again, I think just because of the great numbers at the beginning of the year, I can't give him too low of a player rating, but I'll give him a solid B- because again, if you just look at that first half of the year, it's really, really good. Yeah. I mean, if you extrapolate that and, give him like those numbers for the rest of the year, he'd be MVP candidate, but it was kind of unsustainable for him. He had that injury. And unfortunately, it didn't really work out towards the end of the season. This is a player I do want back if we can keep him. He has a lot of potential. It's clear. Hopefully a good offseason, another, offseason and preseason of training with this squad under Robbie Nielsen's system. He seems like a player that really fits Robbie's system. So I don't know why we wouldn't try and keep him.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with all of that. I think, Carlos, you and I might be in agreement for a good portion of this show and probably next one too. But all the points that you made are correct here. Where I would ding him again is the fact that the production fell off, and that did coincide with him taking a step back because of the injury, Ryan Spalding coming down, and then him working his way back into the lineup from then. Unfortunately, but on the other side of things, you can see that Blake Bodley is a player who has a lot of potential to turn into one of the better players in his position in this league.
Absolutely.
He's turning 27, so there's not much, it's not potential at this point. It's just, it needs to happen, but it can happen. I believe that it can happen if he gets a good run of games and that's not interrupted like it was. Maybe the Rowdies don't go and take the, let's say, August break that we saw this year, where it all just everybody dipped in form from August onward up until the last 2 games in that 1 week at IMG. So if that doesn't happen, maybe the whole team is looking at things a little bit differently. So I agree with you there. Probably a B for Blake Bodley. And I think that if he can get that string of games that he needs, that puts him on that good footing for the whole season, let's say at the end of 36, 38 games, whatever it turns into, he's probably got a lot more numbers than he has right now. And I could absolutely see him ultimately becoming one of the USL Championship first team, second team selections, if all of that comes together the way that I would probably expect it to. And the last little note that Eureka put up on the screen there, apparently someone has noted that Ryan Spalding might be going to Louisville. I just looked at that. I Googled for information. I didn't see that. So
Breaking.
Mr. Matuasa, if you could give us some more information as to where that came from, that would be interesting. But Blake Bodley coming back, obviously. Either Spalding or Bodley, I think Rowdies fans would be happy with, but Bodley does have a lot more to give. I will say that for sure.
Yeah.
Not more than Spalding, but he does have more to give.
Well, it could be more. You know what I mean?
Could be.
Blake, again, this is a guy with, again, you mentioned he's 26, right? Kind of in the prime, kind of in his physical peak. I think you make a good point that his peak should be coming right about now or the next year or two, right? There's not really a lot of room for potential in the same way you talk about a guy like Damian Rivera, right?
Yes.
You're getting to that point where it's like, where are you going to max out? And I'd like to see where Blake Bodley maxes out in terms of his production. That being said, you have a guy like Leo Fernandez who had an MVP season just a couple seasons ago at his age. Not super old by any means. Leo, I love you. I'm not calling you old. But you get what I'm saying, right? Blake Bodley, great player. And I think the way you get to that peak in terms of production is with a little bit of consistency. He seems to fit in Robbie's system, and I don't see why it wouldn't continue to be a good fit going forward. Yeah. Again, by the way, Spalding to Louisville, I don't know. I haven't seen anything like that on Twitter or anything. That's my go-to source for information. So maybe just a stab in the dark there for now. But that would not be great for the league. I'll tell you what. Let's jump to the next player, James, here. A guy who didn't play a ton for us either, but he was on loan from Charlotte. Ben Bender came in here. Looked like a pretty exciting midfielder. He's 6 foot. He's got a great physical build to him for that position. It's not too common to have someone like his height in that area. And he's solid. I mean, he had 9 games, 6 starts, 1 assist, 1 man of the match that we gave him. We'll see if he comes back. Maybe, probably, question mark. Not quite sure. This one's kind of a hard one for me because not a ton of memorable performances per se. None that really stick out, in my mind. Looking back at the stats, it looks like he had that assist against Lewis Hilton, which was an incredibly memorable goal. But to my point, I didn't even remember that Ben Bender was involved with that play, respectfully. I'm sure I'm not doubting the stats. I'm sure he was, but just not something I recall. Again, solid game. I think he came in that game against Colorado. Yeah, he came in that game against Colorado Springs. We were down. We lost 4-2, and we're getting blown out without those garbage time goals at the end of the game. That might have been the game we gave him a man of the match in, by the way, because he came in pretty strong. He came in aggressive, and I liked what I saw. In terms of, is this a guy I see with this team? going forward. Like, yeah, I mean, he seems like he's got a lot to give, to be honest. He's still pretty young, right? He has potential, I think, to continue to grow in that position. He looks pretty good. Again, he's got a great build for that area, and I think he has something to offer this team. In terms of the performances this year, again, just hard to grade. I'll give him like a bang on average C. Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to really criticize him a ton on. But again, just not anything particularly coming to mind here. So super scientific, like you said, but mostly anecdotal here.
This is the first one, I guess, where you and I will differ, because if I were going to grade him, I would give Ben Bender a D. That's specifically down to the fact that I had higher expectations for him. Ben Bender was one of the best players coming out of college when he was drafted. I believe out of Maryland, he was the first pick in his draft into MLS. Whatever that counts for these days, who knows? But I did expect him to come in and do a bit more, contribute a bit more, especially on the stats. So I will just say, in this case, I think that Ben Bender could have done a little bit better than what I expected. And ultimately, when he's coming off the bench, coming on loan as a player with those expectations, that's unfortunate. And I think that he is a very good player. He has a lot of potential, but I don't think that Rowdies fans saw it. So we will see what happens. He's returning to Charlotte from his loan, and I don't know what they plan to do, of course. But yeah, we'll see. There's probably going to be a lot of turnover up there too. We're going to have a lot of MLS players for USL teams to sift through coming in a couple of months, and this probably could be one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fair. I think your point's taken. This is a guy that, again, I wasn't too familiar with. But folks in Charlotte had him pretty highly touted. I mean, they talked really, really highly of him. So I take your point. I kind of forgot that those expectations were somewhat high on our end. But again, I think in terms of my own personal expectations, it wasn't, necessarily met maybe, but I don't have a lot to knock him for either. So I'll stick with my grade of C. I guess that's our first differing grade on that end. Okay, James. Next guy, another guy who didn't play a ton with us, but got some decent games in here. A Rowdy who had a close to MVP season last year, didn't necessarily match those numbers in the beginning of this portion of the year. Charlie Dennis had 13 appearances, 1 goal, 1 assist, and then we shot him off to Phoenix, Arizona, midway through the season. Poor guy went cross country, kept the heat, but without any of the beautiful beaches in Phoenix. So unfortunate for him. He had a pretty decent year, I guess, over there. I mean, they had a pretty good, back end of the season to qualify for the playoffs. But in terms of Rowdy's performances, again, another player with nothing like particularly memorable on the year. He had 1 goal and 1 assist. That goal, to be fair, actually was memorable now that I think about it. It was against Sacramento. You remember that early part of the game, or that early part of the season when things were a little bit unclear about where this team was going, and they had arguably the performance of the season over there in Sacramento. Charlie Dennis got that goal, just pure grit, chasing down that ball, knocking it by the Sacramento keeper. It was a great goal. I think for that reason alone, he gets a higher grade than maybe is rational on my end, because it truly was, like, I think, our performance of the season. Maybe you count that last indie game, to build some momentum going into the playoffs, but I think that one's up there for me. Great performance in that game. Again, nothing particularly memorable after that. Wasn't producing the numbers we kind of got accustomed to with him, so I wasn't particularly bummed out by the sale to Phoenix. Wish we were more transparent about what we get in return, but I guess that's the nature of U.S. soccer. It'd be much easier to grade, what I think about sending him off to Phoenix. Either way, in terms of Rowdy's performances themselves, a solid, again, I'll give him a C+ in this one. Yeah, a high-end C for that goal in particular against Sacramento, which, again, was probably one of my favorite games of the year.
Fair enough. For Charlie Dennis, he started the season injured, and when he finally got back to full fitness, he just found himself on the outside looking in. Players had already filled in the positions that he would be playing, and He never was able to work his way past that, which is unfortunate for him. Obviously, the Rowdies were doing well at that point, and I think that it just worked out that if we could sell him, we could get his salary off the books and then maybe get some money. But as you said, Carlos, we have no idea how much. So maybe somewhere down the line we'll get that information, but at least not now.
Probably like a few million at least.
Maybe.
Yeah. No.
That'll go into fixing Al Lang after the hurricane floods, we can hope.
Oh yeah.
But
Absolutely.
we'll differ slightly on this one. If you give him a C+, I'll give him a C-.
Okay.
But that's not that bad. So we'll leave Charlie Dennis with that on his way out to Phoenix.
C's get degrees, James. Yeah, absolutely. By the way, here's a good time for a shameless plug, James. C's get degrees, but if you want to get your loved ones a gift this holiday season, liking and subscribing is free. But if you need some new threads and you want to get your loved ones a fun RBLR Tampa Bay Sports gift, you can support this podcast by heading over to shop.rblrsports.com and checking out all the fun designs cooked up over there. We've got Rowdies gear, we've got Lightning gear, Sun gear, Bucks gear, Rays gear, who are now the Tampa Rays, not Tampa Bay. They play in Tampa now, in the cursed stadium that is Steinbrenner, with all the Yankees gear and the logos outside the stadium in Tampa. Frustrates me that exists to this day, but that's a team that needs your support next year pretty heavily. So much stadium drama going on with them. Time to support your Rays too. Get some gear, rblrsports.com, shop.rblrsports.com. Promo code COYR for 10% off your purchase. So check it out. Some cool stuff. Good time in the off season, good time for holiday season. Good time to get your loved ones something fun. Fill in, the empty lack of Rowdies with some Rowdies gear.
There we go.
Yeah. James, let's jump into this back end of our midfielders here. It's been a marathon talking about the midfielders. We have just a few more to go here. One of them, a youngin', James, 17-year-old, turning 18. Nate Worth, 21 appearances, 18 of those off the bench. Again, pretty consistent number for such a young kid, getting a lot of playing time in the USL. He had 1 assist, 1 man of the match, but most importantly, James, I think this was his man of the match.
I'm almost certain.
Beautiful goal against Charleston that went semi-viral across U.S. sports social media.
Yeah.
I saw it everywhere. It was really, really cool to see. It was cool to see all the fans in the background of like all the national outlets retweeting this kid being 17 and knocking in the hammer against Charleston. What a game that was. Nate Worth, again, it's hard to be like too harsh on a kid who's 17.
Yeah.
This is where the word potential really applies when you're talking about a kid like this. 17 years old, turning 18, had one very memorable performance, and then several other decent games for his age. Again, I feel like I have to qualify everything with his age, right? It's that should add on to the level of impressed we should be.
Yes,
we've been able to do this much at this age. Again, you're talking about a 17-year-old kid. Like, you're not even like fully physically developed at that age, and he's just like killing it. He had a great game, against Charleston. He had a bunch of great games against teams throughout the year. A couple of good minutes off the bench. Just some great stuff from him. I can't complain too much on his end. I'll give him a B flat, a B. Yeah, just solid. I mean, again, maybe higher than I would give any other player who was like a little bit older, but truly, I think I have to factor his age into this grade. Like, it's impressive. Potential is there. Again, a guy I want to stick around at least one more year, get those numbers up, get a bit better. Get the numbers up, and then we'll send you off to Europe, and we'll get a good paycheck from it. So, all the best for Nate. Hope you stick around at least one more year.
Yeah, the USL to European club pipeline is actually picking up right now. You think about Kobe Henry, you think about Josh Winder, you think about Nick Markanich, who is on his way as soon. Well, I guess it should be just about now because Charleston are out. But so I think that Nate Worth will probably be on that line relatively soon. And in the meantime, we can enjoy him while we have him. I do think that you got to factor in his age. I'll stick with a B. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah. That Charleston pack is so loud, James. Good Lord. I will never stop being a Charleston hater. I hopped a player numerically. Let's jump back to Danny Crisostomo really quickly. 27 years old, turning 28. 33 appearances on the year, James. Wow. 29 starts, 1 goal, 3 assists. We gave him 5 man of the match awards. That's on the high end in the midfield unit here. Incredible stuff. This is a player who I think in terms of players that surprised me, this is the guy I would point to.
Yep.
Incredible stuff. I thought he would be like a guy that comes off the bench, kind of role player. You know, we have Charlie Dennis at the beginning of the year. I figured we'd see that be our go-to guy in that part of the field. Inevitably, Charlie Dennis leaves. Danny Crisostomo, who was already playing a lot, continues to play in that role and just continue to surprise me. Loved it. Incredible stuff for him. I give him a fantastic A-. Great season from him. I mean, I really can't ask for too much more from Crisostomo. It was from his position. It was great.
Well, I guess I will disagree with you on this one a little bit because, first of all, I'll point out the things where I do agree. He is one of the players that surprised me. There are 2 players that surprised me, and they play in effectively the same position. As we went through the season, we developed this formation where in front of Lewis Hilton, there were 2 players who were a little bit more central than the outside wingbacks. So we had the wingbacks, and then we had 2 number 8s kind of, and they would interact with their wingbacks on either side to create little triangles with either Manuel Arteaga on the left or Cal Jennings on the right. And the one on the right was Danny Crisostomo, and the one on the left was Josh Perez. So those were the 2 players that really surprised me in 2024. And I will say that I think they both had very good stretches of the season. My problem is I think both of them had their good stretches of their best stretches of the season at the beginning. And then unfortunately, just like we said with Blake Bodley, I will say that it tapered off as we went along. And Danny Crisostomo did turn it on as we got into those, let's say, the IMG spell, the IMG era, and then the playoffs. But I think that's actually when he scored too. But Danny Crisostomo, for me, will get a B- because it was not something that he carried through a long enough portion of the season for me to rate it higher. And that includes the August and everything after portion. Shout out to my Counting Crows listeners out there.
That's a good point, James. And I think for the sake of consistency on my end, if I gave Blake Bodley that rating, using that metric, I think it's only fair that I slightly revise my rating for Crisostomo and I will still give him a higher grade than you, B+, because I do think he had a really, really, really great year. And again, the surprise factor, I think, factors into that higher rating for me. Kind of under my radar. Maybe under your radar as well, maybe under everyone's radar, but certainly under my radar, came in great. So, but yeah, certainly your point's taken. Back half of the year, a little bit slower. So I'll bump it down to a B-. But again, I can't really go any lower than that. That's where I'll leave Danny Crisostomo.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next player then. That is Nick Moon, 28 years old, 16 appearances, 11 of those off the bench. He actually started to become a regular starter towards the end of the season and through the playoffs. He had 1 goal, 1 man of the match, 1 own goal as well, it should be noted. And unfortunately, he dealt with a lot of injuries in this season. So that is why he probably was limited to so few appearances and so many of them being off the bench. With that being said, it does impact my score for Nick Moon. I think that he really was able to turn it on once he actually got playing time. Surprise, surprise, right? But I'm going to have to I'll probably go with a C- for Nick Moon just because we didn't see enough of him for me to say that I would like to bump that any higher. But that doesn't mean that he's a bad player, obviously. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have a lot to contribute. It was just an unfortunate season, in my opinion. Yeah.
This is a guy who I don't think we ever got the full Nick Moon at any point in the year. This was a guy who was really, really, really highly touted by the poor San Diego loyal fans who don't have a team anymore. Him and Blake Bodley together was supposed to be this kind of continuation of what they had at San Diego. That's what I expected would continue to happen over here. And unfortunately, Nick Moon just never really got to where I expected he would be. Again, because of those injuries, mainly probably. But he just really wasn't everything that I thought he would be. But again, you can caveat that with the injuries. Just really wasn't there. I I can't be too harsh because again of the injuries. Maybe I factor that in. And I think I'm going to agree with you and say a C minus. He had a couple of good performances, but other than that, pretty unmemorable. Is this a guy, James? If I ask you right now, if this is a guy you want to see back on this team next year, that you'd be happy about it if he's re-signed, what are you telling me?
I would say, yeah. I think that he has the ability to be a better player, obviously, than we saw. But are you ready for this? What I want in 2025, I want the full moon.
I like that. Okay. Noted.
I got about the response that I was hoping for.
Yeah. I mean, it was there. I liked it. We'll workshop it though. Maybe the delivery. Yeah. I don't know. Like I think I would agree with you. I wouldn't be like ecstatic. I'd be okay with it. I think there's more to him than what we got this year. Like I said, I didn't say Chrysostom, by the way. That's a guy I'd love to have back next year.
Yes.
That level of consistency in the midfield is very helpful. So let me just reiterate that. But yeah, Nick Moon, I'm sure he'd be good for us next year with a full off season of being injury free and a preseason of being injury free. Again, this is a guy I like, Blake Bodley, who I think fits Robbie's system really well. So I think I'd like to have him back next year for sure. I think we can see that reigniting of the Bodley Moon pairing in the back, but who knows? Off season with potential for a lot of turnover, like you said. So he's on the wish list, certainly. But okay. Last home stretch, James, in the midfield. Zach Arivo, 3 appearances, all off of the bench, left to Rhode Island FC, and has had a fantastic season over there ever since that happened. Classic on the Rowdies end. I don't know. You didn't really do anything for us. Like D.
I was going to give him a non-grade for us specifically,
sure.
But of course, he's originally from New England, and boy, does he like being home. It seems like.
This is the guy who I was so hyped for last year. By the way, we saw what he could do at Birmingham, and I was like, yeah, this guy's the real deal. I mean, he's going to add some length in his size in the midfield, right? Like just a tall guy, lanky body that can get there. Be like a staunch physical defensive mid. He can get upfield pretty well. He's like fast for his size. And but he was injured like all of last year, still injured this year. Like he never really found his footing, but apparently all it took was the fresh, chilly waters of Rhode Island to reinvigorate his spirits and apparently his body. And now he's fine and doing really incredible. He's doing at Rhode Island what I was hoping and almost expecting would happen here. This is probably one of the more unfortunate situations that didn't, like, we've had players that come here and don't live up to the hype or my expectations. I think this is the one that kind of hurt me the most, in terms of just like what he could do. Wasn't able to do it here and almost immediately did it at another club. All the best for him, obviously. But yeah, this one hurts a bit just in terms of what could have been down here.
Yep. I can't say it any better than that. It hurts.
Yeah.
The next player that we have on this list is a name that a lot of people will not be too familiar with, Nick Scubas. He made 1 appearance off the bench. That was his professional debut, and then he moved on to college, I believe at The Ohio State. I'm not sure. It's either that or Indiana.
They're number 1 in the country right now. Ohio State is going into the national soccer, the NCAA tournament, number 1 seed in the country right now.
That's true. And the tournament, I believe, starts on Thursday. So possibly Nick Scubas could be getting some good playing time there. Yeah. But there's not too much that we can say here. He was an academy signing. He was allowed to make his professional debut because Robbie Nielsen thought that he had earned it in his play in training, obviously. That I do specifically remember that from one of the post games. Well, the only post game that we talked about Nick Scubas, obviously. But we wish him all the best, and I don't know that I can give him a grade for 1 appearance off the bench, personally.
I literally don't remember when that was. But that being said, he is on the Ohio State roster. I couldn't tell you if he's played because I feel like that's so much clicking, and these college soccer websites are just so poorly designed.
That is so true.
Yeah. Long story short, he's on the number 1 ranked team in the country right now. Hope he makes it to the finals so that Georgetown can beat him. Georgetown's number 4 seed, by the way. So we have that home seed all the way to the Final Four, which is in Cary, North Carolina. So shout out the Railhawks. Hopefully I'm down there by December for a Georgetown Final Four. And who knows? Maybe we run into Nick Scubas over there. That'd be a fun interview at the college.
That would be a good interview.
Yeah. I'll let you know. If I see him, James, I'll let you know. We'll run into him. Yeah, I don't remember his performance. So whatever. Good luck to him until he plays Georgetown.
There you go. And the last midfielder on our list before we move into the goalkeepers is Pacific Nyongabire. He is currently, by the way, literally today, on international duty with Burundi. I believe that they lost, but still pretty good stuff. They were playing against Senegal, so that's a pretty good team, and fair enough if they lose. Either way, we'll get back to Pacific Nyongabire and his time with the Rowdies. 24 years old, turning 25 over the offseason. He made 34 appearances, including 26 starts. He had 2 assists this year and 2 man-of-the-match performances, according to us, the RBLR Rowdies crew. With all of that being said, I think that Pacific Nyongabire has been an interesting choice here. We all expected Nick Moon to be the starting right wing back over the course of this season. We have already touched on Nick Moon and his injury problems, so Pacific Nyongabire filled in. I think that at times he had I think that at times he contributed a lot. Where I would point to Carlos is I was relatively frequently frustrated with Pacific Nyongabire's end product. He would often get himself into a good position with the ball. And then unfortunately, that would not result in a goal. Whether it was his pass that was supposed to be the assist, or whether he was on the whether he was on the end of it and he did not put his shot on goal. I remember feeling this way, let's say 4 or 5 times, probably. I couldn't point to them specifically. I would say that is the biggest memory that I have related to Pacific Nyongabire for 2024.
Yeah, this one's unfortunate because so I'll caveat what I said about Nick Moon earlier and kind of expecting him to be the 1-2 duo with Bodley. Maybe that's a stretch because I saw what Nyongabire could do. I saw what his potential was. Some of his highlights from his past clubs and in the Canadian Premier League too, I believe, right? That's where he came from, right? CPL. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It looked like if I remember what I said in the offseason leading up to the beginning of the year, I think what I said about Pacific Nyongabire is that he is going to be what I wanted Malik Johnson to be for the Rowdies, if you remember that name from several seasons ago now.
Yes, that is a good callback.
Malik Johnson is, to this day, one of kind of my random favorite Rowdies players of the modern era. He just was so explosive and could really turn it on in a way that I haven't seen many Rowdies players do in that wingback area or in the fullback spot, right mid. He just was so explosive when he played in this club. Didn't produce like a ton of big numbers, but scored goals in a pretty good chunk, cutting to the right, speeding up, scoring a goal. That's kind of what I thought, just based on the highlights and what I've seen from Pacific Nyongabire, kind of what he's capable of, what I knew about him going into the season. That's what I thought he would be, but like kind of a perfected version of Malik Johnson. And it really wasn't there, unfortunately. I knew he would get more minutes. I didn't know he would get the starts he did. Understanding Nick Moon picked up the injuries, it kind of made more sense that he got the starts more regularly. It was really difficult for me to decide whether I wanted him or Monjoma in more because I don't know. The Nyongabire show just wasn't really what I wanted it to be. Yeah. I think it just fell significantly beyond my expectations. He didn't score any goals, which I thought he would be able to do a bit more of, at least a few from that area of the field. Certainly didn't produce a number of assists I would have expected from his spot on the field. I think this one, unfortunately, is just a below expectations D-. Because, again, we gave him those 2 man of the match awards, 2 assists on the year, but I think there was just much, much more maybe we both expected, but certainly I expected from him on this one. Gun to my head, do I want him back next year? again, it's hard for me to say no because he truly seems to like have that potential to turn it on.
Yeah.
But it just never really occurred in the exciting, thrilling way that I associated with a guy like Malik Johnson in the almost identical roles. It wasn't there for him. Shout out Malik Johnson. I wonder what he's doing. I really don't know what he's up to. Yeah. Again, he has the potential for it. It was not there really at all this year. I can't really think of particularly great performances from him this year.
Yeah. I won't go with a D, but I will say that I think that I expected more from him. So I will go with a C in this one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely wanted more out of him, and it's unfortunate. So
Absolutely.
all right. Actually, folks, this is where we're going to leave our player grades this week specifically because we have 3 more goalkeepers, but we want to talk about the USL Championship final that is coming up. So we will push the goalkeepers to the future, and we will get into Jordan Farr, Phil Breno, and Tanner Aiken at that time. Right now, let's talk really quickly about the extra time segment that we have here. Manuel Arteaga and Cal Jennings were named to the USL Championship All-League second team. So that is pretty good. They obviously had several goals this year. I can tell you really quickly that Arteaga had 18 USL goals and 2 in the Open Cup. Cal Jennings on the other side had 16 USL goals and 3 in the Open Cup. Obviously, those are great numbers. It's unfortunate that they were not put in the USL first team, but you're up against players like Wilson Harris, Nick Markanich, does kind of make a little bit of sense. And obviously those players, I think, Wilson Harris didn't, but others did get a little farther than the Rowdies. So that's how it works out. And fair enough. On the other side of things, the Rowdies have announced at least 2 players with new contracts for the 2025 season, those being Leo Fernandez and Lewis Hilton. Fantastic. We already mentioned that we wanted to see Lewis Hilton back, and we will at least get that. We didn't get to Leo Fernandez tonight. We will in the future. Carlos, immediate thoughts.
I'm happy they're back. I told you Lewis Hilton is a guy I really want back. Leo Fernandez, again, who we'll talk about in the future, along with the goalies and everything. He turned it on at the end of the year. I mean, he was injured, came back on, found his rhythm. He seems like he still has a good amount to give for this team. Really, really excited to have him back. These are 2 guys that are kind of core to the Rowdies culture, to the Rowdies core that we've had for the last several years. That's kind of been close to breaking through that glass ceiling, right, and getting that championship. Good. I'm good. I'm glad they're back. You know, Leo Fernandez is a guy that even if he's not playing a ton, like he's the guy you want to come off the bench. He's a guy that brings a great level of leadership to a team. Fantastic that they're back. Fantastic.
Yep. 2 thumbs up. If I had more thumbs, I would put those up as well.
Yep.
In the USL League One final, Union Omaha beat Spokane Velocity handily, I will say.
Yeah.
It was a fun game to watch, and very happy for all the people over in Omaha. Very happy in particular for Mishak Jerome, a Haitian defender who plays for Union Omaha. He was recently in a cooking issue at his, like there was an explosion in his kitchen at his home. I believe that the club has a GoFundMe for his medical bills.
That's out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's very weird, but please, if you have a little bit of money to give, obviously it's a rough time for a lot of people because we have just had our own hurricanes and Christmas season is coming up too. But if you do have a little bit of money, please go to Union Omaha's GoFundMe for Mishak Jerome and his medical bills. Either way, they all want it for him. They all specifically said that. So that was very cool. Yeah. And he gets to celebrate with his teammates, I believe from a hospital bed at this point, but he is doing better. So that's positive. And we should also note Steven Dos Santos was on the team. He might be retiring, but he gets to go out with a trophy.
Yeah. Good for him to go out with a bang. I loved him when he was at the Rowdies. He just truly was like a fantastic striker in his role. Good Lord. I did not know about that story in Union Omaha, by the way. You caught me so off guard. Why would you frame it as a cooking accident? That's incredible. It's James, you caught me so off guard. Like,
I think it was a cooking accident. I can't remember for sure, but
wow. That's incredible. Good for him though. I mean, that's really cool. You get to celebrate with the team like that still after an insane situation like that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really cool, man. Good for him. Good for the team. Glad that they won so handily for him. Okay. James, last bit of news here we'll talk about very, very quickly. The USL Championship final, Colorado Springs and Rhode Island. The two teams everyone expected to be in the final. Almost certainly. Juan Tejada and JJ Williams both scored in their games, by the way. I am thrilled for this matchup. It's the first time in a while where I'll be happy either way about who wins this final. Former Rowdies on both ends. You have Juan Tejada on Colorado Springs. You have Zach Arevalo and JJ Williams on Rhode Island. And of course, my boy, the Georgetown legend, Aiden Rocha in the center midfield for Colorado Springs, who has continued to impress everyone this year. I want to say I've been on this bandwagon for a little bit. I've been telling you, keep an eye on them. They've been slowly creeping up the table since like the middle part of the year, early middle part of the year. They started terribly. They started like a last place team, and they slowly worked their way up, and they were under everyone's radar. And I was telling you, James, from like week 6, I was like, keep an eye on them. They had a great game last week. And they crept up and they put together a great playoff run that merits a USL Championship appearance. It'll be a really, really good game. It's hard to bet against Rhode Island FC with how hot they are right now. It seems like they're beating any of the odds. And they're playing so well. Their offensive prowess is just on another level right now. JJ Williams is on another level right now. He's playing like we remember him playing for the Rowdies. Just knocking in goals left and right. And Juan Tejada, by the way, keeping up the pressure for Colorado Springs, playing really, really well over there. They're going to have the advantage in the altitude, by the way. You know, it's like, 5,000-6,000 feet. It's going to affect the Rhode Island squad at least a little bit. So keep an eye on that. I think officially for them, the local time kickoff will be like 10 a.m., won't it? Isn't that interesting?
Oh, yeah. You're right about that. Yeah.
So that's going to be –
that's weird.
That would be really interesting if I'm a Colorado Springs fan and the biggest game of my club's history is happening at 10 a.m. local time. What a time to start drinking. But hey, Sunday brunch, right? Or Saturday brunch. Either way,
brunch.
You'll be happy. And hopefully, I'm pulling for them. That's my prediction, James. We're using this, I think, officially as our tiebreaker, given that our prediction standings have you and I tied for first place and Eureka in dead last. I'm taking Colorado Springs to win this one. But again, so hard for me to bet against Rhode Island in a game, in a season where they're just on fire. And they proved it against, I think, what was the best team in the league in Charleston.
Yeah. So, Carlos, you are going with Colorado Springs, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Which
Colorado
leaves Rhode Island for me, despite your staking out how good their form is. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting, and this will obviously help us determine who wins our predictions. We already know who the loser is, Eureka, and at this point, everyone, like we said last week, we do need suggestions for what the winner gets and what the loser gets.
Hot Wings Challenge. Make it happen.
Could get a Hot Wings Challenge, and what would be the opposite for the winner? A Good Wings Challenge?
Yeah, just like a spice of your choice.
Oh, okay. All right.
Paid for by Eureka. Yeah.
Whatever hot sauce you want. Yeah. Okay. Whatever hot sauce you want at RBLR will expense it.
You get to eat the wings with Eureka while Eureka eats the hottest wings. I like that.
He gets his very spicy one, and you just get your good hot sauce.
You get normal wings, and you get to watch him while it happens. That's what happens. Yeah, sounds like a play. That's my suggestion. Feel free to give us anything else. I think that's a pretty good place to start, though. I'd like to see either one of us eating great wings, watching Eureka struggle through a Hot Wings Challenge. But that's where we'll leave it for now, James.
All right. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We appreciate when you do. Give us all the feedback you have on the social medias if you are on them. We are at RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Threads, also on Blue Sky now. We are up to 300 as of tonight, according to Eureka, our producer, who is the one that tracks all of this. So thank you for following us wherever you are. And please, obviously like and subscribe to us as well. I am mostly still on Twitter, despite it all. I am at RBLR James K. You can use the hashtag AskRBLR, or if you'd like to get out Carlos, where could they do that?
At Carlos TPA10 on Twitter. Having a blast with the Ecuador win against Colombia. Yeah, come follow me. It's a good time on Twitter still. I mean, it's a mess, but I'm still using it.
And if you would like to get the rest of us on our podcast, of course, you can do that. You can get the full experience on YouTube, or if you don't want, you can just listen to us on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple and Google Podcasts. Basically, wherever there are podcasts, we are too. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We appreciate it. For the postseason, come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.